Hi everyone, happy Friday and happy May. It's so crazy to see we are already in May, but it's awesome. Taking one day at a time. I'm super excited. Today we're gonna have Hessam. Um, Hi, Dr. Ilham. We have Dr. Hessam who's joining us. I am always fascinated and really triggered by what is the effect of who we are in this space as a human, as how we react to colors, to wayfinding, to space planning, and that's how we always, myself and my team, design spaces. And so I, this is a really fun and also very exciting talk for me because that's one of my really high passion, and I wanted to share that with you to understand this. That's just interior design. It's not the HGTV. We had some prospect in the past that they thought like, oh, can you do this in 1 week and make it happen and put them together, and what is the just doing some decoration, but just actually understanding how design can affect our human psychology. And so I have Hessam today with us, and I'm just waiting for him to join. Hessam, we met several times and we've been collaborating in how we can bring this research to the world in the broader spectrum. So from even medical spaces is absolutely such an important space as far as our health, as our well-being, and how we can be intentional and create healing space. But how can we take that and bring it to our any kind of environment, right? So Hessam is on. So let me see. I can bring him on really quick. It says unable to join. So we'll wait for him to request again. There's some really trigger points in the space that you can pay attention to it, as far as how you create a really amazing space, as far as being. So when you say it's interior design, people, the first thing they think is decoration. I mean, that's a very, I would say that's the icing on the cake, but first you have to build up your cake. You have to know your ingredients. Let me try to, I think Hessam is on. Okay.
Hi, Mitra.
Hi, Hessam. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I love your background.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sitting outside getting some fresh air.
That's
How have you been?
good, good,
All
very
right.
good. I had my moments in this corona virus episode, but just keeping, keep pushing and staying positive on the daily basis.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
way to do it.
yeah, exactly. So I was just talking a little bit about when we say interior design, what does
Hmm.
that mean? So before you join, so
Absolutely.
um, are you enjoying the outside environment?
Yeah, I try to actually.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I have not introduced you, so I'll let you to introduce yourself to just
Okay.
give you a little bit of a background, because uh, I would love us to keep this discussion going, as like this is our first time doing Instagram Live.
Hmm.
And I'm super excited for all of our followers and friends joining us and listening to this. But also, we want to keep this recording and share it in the future, and really spreading the message how interior design can affect our well-being, from mental to physical to psychological perspective of who we are. So
Absolutely. Yeah, actually, I listened to the other two live Instagrams that you had with the physicians and medical doctors, and that was very interesting. Just like the way that they look at this matter from their perspective. So it's a growing knowledge, and just spreading this out and trying to get educated and educate other people, I think that's the best way to do it.
Mhm.
So introducing myself, my name is Hessam Ghamari, and I've been in academia for a number of years, teaching at California State University in Northridge, where you graduated.
Okay.
So I've had multiple years of experience in academia. Um, Along with that, on this side, I've been practicing as an architect and interior designer. So basically, my research and basically my passion has been on how environment impact the way we live, the
Mhm.
quality of life we have, and how environment can improve the health and well-being. I think it's a very important matter. These days we are facing the challenge for around the world. So how we as designers can contribute to health of people, I think that's a mission that we should follow.
Mhm.
So that's a little about me. I would like to, uh, just like thank you for having me today on this Insta Live and just exchanging ideas. I really appreciate what you do and contribute, as a designer, as a creative person, and what your firm is doing. I think it's absolutely amazing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I know you absolutely um, basically you made this research part of your life calling because you got your PhD on like really doing design research
Mhm.
on how that affects us. So if we can start like dive into this because
Sure.
I'm super excited to hear about your side and I'm sure our audience as well. So would you help us understand what is design research? Because we talk about research in so many different broad spectrum, but I want to now zoom in interior design and also when
Mhm.
it comes to healthcare because our message in my company, we're committed to transform spaces and as well as creating healing spaces. Healing means so many different things, but when it comes to technical and being practical, I want to hear it from your side. So, what is the design research? What does that mean, even?
Okay, so basically everything started from a few decades ago, like before 1970s. Um, the focus of health design was more toward caregivers, staff, and nurses. And the idea was how can we help them to do the job better and more efficient. But from that time, things changed, and people realized that there are some other stakeholders involved in the healing process.
Mm-hmm.
Patients definitely are the main focus there, and as well as family visitors that they are concerned about their relatives or their dears that they are sitting in the hospital. So things changed from that time. Let me just tell you a brief a story of one of the famous research to just start this conversation. In 80s, a researcher, his name was Roger Ulrich, and he started the research design on healthcare by focusing on a hospital and collecting data for 8 years
Mm-hmm.
on different patient rooms. And these patient rooms, they were divided into sets and they were identical except the fact that half of these patient rooms they had views to outside to a park, and the other half of this patient room they had views to a man-made environment like such as a brick wall or something that is not natural. So the idea for this research was how natural environment impacts the way that we live or the patient's pain or health outcomes. So they collected data for 8 years, and what they found was very interesting because they found that the patients that they were in the patient rooms that they had views to outside, they had less pain, they had a
Mm-hmm.
shorter stay in the hospital, they had less complaints about the healing process to caregivers.
Mm-hmm.
Overall they had a better health outcome. And from this simple study, I mean it was a complicated study at the time, but just the idea was to control on all environmental factors and only focus on views to outside and the impact that nature has on our health and well-being. So what they found was kind of the starting point of the emergence of evidence-based healthcare design, which has been translated to architecture, interior design, and many other fields that they involve with design. So basically, evidence-based design then introduced and defined by the Center of Healthcare Design as basically basing decisions of the built environment on credible research to reach the best possible outcomes. And that was the definition that they had. So there are different ways that we can do that, then like introducing decentralized nurses stations and how we can have private rooms or some areas that accommodate family visitors, during the hospital. You mentioned wayfinding, how people can navigate through the hospital. So there have been different strategies that people have talked and researched to investigate how environment can impact on our health and well-being.
I have one question that I put that I was so interesting for him because I was reading some of your research, and that was, what are the trigger fear response that we have in the environment? Because let me tell you, like, because we within my company, we have different specialty within medical, right? Like the way we design a plastic surgeon office who has an OR or just in general a plastic surgeon office is very different than how we design in a dental office. Dental, we face or we deal with a lot of mental pain. Like we as a human, like we have so much fear going to dentists before even we know that dentist, who that dentist is, right? Like let's say when we do plastic surgeons, we know like we're healing with the self-image healing, right? It's not a lot of physical per se that is very vivid. So we very much like pivot our design based on that human psychology. So when we say trigger fear response, what are those research? Because I saw like from another research how you did a lot of brain scanning, like how they correlate and what they shown in the research.
Sure. So that's a very interesting topic because we know that environment impacts us in different ways. So one way that we can investigate is how it can impact our physiology. You mentioned like how we can reduce pain in hospitals. So overall, the impact of environment on human health and well-being should be investigated by different means. But what we know is like psychology and mental health is one aspect of that, because if we have the physical condition that patients can have comfort, if they have control on their environments, if just for different aspects, like if they have used to outside, that impacts their mental health. And research has shown that mental health, that can result in having a better physical condition, like that can help to reduce pain for the patients. So as you said, for different settings, there are different approaches and there are different methods of investigation. But what we know is, for different settings, we should investigate and find the appropriate methodology. And that's a very important thing these days. Like finding the right methodology is something that we have to be very cautious about. So going back to what you just mentioned, most of the studies in the past few years have been focusing on behavioral data. And what we mean by behavioral data is how can we investigate people based on their behavior or their preference. Do you like this environment, or do you dislike this environment, or just like the spectrum of liking, disliking? That's one thing. Or maybe just like focusing on their behavior, see if they feel comfortable in that environment. That's another thing. Or you can just focus on neural responses. Like there are studies that we have done in the past looking at how brain and how the activations happening in the brain tells us what people perceive and how they can react to those, physical
How do
conditions.
they react to it? Like, can you give us an example? Like just the one scenario of like what is that method that you have used and how the brain responded to it?
Sure, I have I have actually two examples talking about the responses or the impact of the or investigation of the impact of the physical condition on human beings. So one study was focusing on nature-based images and investigating what are the impacts of nature-based environment on patients. I already mentioned some data on that, but for this specific study, we used neuroimaging technique using fMRI machine to scan the brain of human participants.
So you
And
literally put all of the sensors, you attach them, and then like they're watching. So just walk us through it so I can like
sure.
more understand.
So for that for that study, actually, we had the fMRI machine. So people have to be under fMRI machine, so they cannot walk.
Got
So
it.
this, but at the same time that they are scanned, we could showcase some of the images that was part of the study. So we were investigating the idea that if we expose our human participants to nature-based images versus just simple or neutral images, what are the differences in terms of activations in their brain?
Got it.
So and the intention of this study is you go to a hospital, you have to lay down for a number of days and you have to look at the ceiling, and usually the ceiling of the hospitals are neglected and they haven't been designed well. So the idea was, if we come up with some ideas to expose these people with some nature-based images, and the idea actually was more toward light fixtures that they represent sky images. Like imagine you are laying down on a patient bed and you are looking at the ceiling and you see just images of the sky. So basically we have our participants scan and showcasing these images while they are scanned on their fMRI machine. And what we found was very interesting, because those participants, they showed activations in the brain through the images that they were nature-based in the areas that associates with the sense of dreaming, right? So sense of dreaming, our interpretation, working with neuroscience experts in the field, means that people tend to sleep, right? And that's exactly what we want in healthcare environment. We want people to have a better sleep quality, because we know sleep quality has,
Decrease.
impact on their healing, process. And as a result, they have a shorter stay in the hospital, and that's the main intention of the healing process. But on the other hand, looking at neutral images and getting a scan, what we found was that was generating and activating areas in the brain that associates with the sense of hallucinations. So our interpretation was they might take more medications and they might have more pain, in those kind of situations. Yeah.
Awesome. It's phenomenal. Like when you get to the really research part of it, that how environment affects us the most. And I truly believe nothing is more healing than the nature. Like when you, with your first example that you gave, like when the patients, the basically the hospital room was facing towards the nature, or like when we're looking at the skies, even like, or like looking at the trees, and like it's super healing, and like seeing the effect on us, it's very, very powerful. So my other question is the role of colors. Is it raining on your side?
Yeah.
I'm like, am I saying it right? Do you want to move? Or you're
Yeah, I
okay?
can move. Let me.
Yeah, let's move.
It's not that bad, but I can move.
Yeah. We don't want you to get soaking wet
Okay.
while in your Instagram live.
Okay, now it's better.
Okay, awesome.
Okay.
Very good. So the other part is one of my really how do I say, like my strength in design is
Mm-hmm.
color. And I see my relationship with colors. That's why like my home is very open, neutral, uh, less is more. So when that's why like when you go to our website and look at our design, we try to really stay as neutral and create that
Mm-hmm.
canvas for us as a human to be able to embrace ourselves into that specific practice. Like say if it's plastic surgeon, if it's GI doctor, or if it's dentist or anything, like we really collaborate in the beginning with them to make sure the environment is really created in the way that is going to embrace their patient or their clientele, right?
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell us a little bit about the role of color psychology and I believe the other piece of that, the space planning. You know, when you do color and it comes lighting and then space planning, how what has been the good research that you've done um, behind that?
Sure. Actually, that's a very interesting, touchy subject because, uh, you know, actually, I have a paper published on the impact of color on the psychology in healthcare environments. And the more you look at this matter, the more you find that you have to be very careful when it comes to color because there are a lot of studies that they don't have a rigorous research behind it, but they have come up with some design recommendations. That's not necessarily true. So the
So you're
outcome,
saying there's some like miss like informational or like some like so many different perspective in the market or out there about color psychology, right?
exactly, right, yes, yeah. So the
And
point
why is
is,
that? Is it like a different, sorry, is it like a different point of view from different expert, or is it like not a well researched article just been published?
I think it's more about the validity and reliability of research. When it comes to uh, investigating the impact of physical environments and the environmental attributes on on human health and well-being, what I believe we should do is we have to control other variables, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a study that we're just talking about, those patient rooms that they have used to outside versus the ones that they don't have that was all about how you can control all confounding variables and just make sure that you are measuring the right thing. So when it comes to color, the research that I've been looking into is there are many different studies, but some of them they have validity issues. So the point is, we know that color has impact. It has a huge impact, but the point is, we should be very mindful of recommending design ideas. But
Can
depending
you
on the
give us an
settings,
example? Let's just get an example, like any specific, uh, I don't know, pain point or any specialty
mhm.
like that is a suitable or not suitable color that can be used in the environment.
Yeah, I think you have much better examples than me because you have done
No,
a
I just want
lot
to
of
hear.
practical studies, definitely. Yeah, but since my some of my research has been on wayfinding, I think the importance of the color and how it contributes to wayfinding is absolutely important because what we know is like having contrast in the environment, just like from visual connection and the interaction with the environment. When you navigate and walk through a hospital, you would like to have that amount of or that degree of contrast that helps you to see better, to have that visual connection. So there are some hospitals, and it's just like not the best environment that you navigate through. And there are different reasons for it, like maybe lack of signage, maybe like a spatial
Signage
organization
is
of the
big.
environment and
Signage
has
is
an issue.
big.
But
Yeah.
even for the signage, the color is a big deal. Like regardless of what kind of color you use, having that sort of contrast in terms of like text on the background and how that signage has contrast with the environment,
Mm-hmm.
that helps us to see better, right? It's even a more important issue when it comes to talking about visual impaired patients, right? So they go to hospitals, they want to find their way, and sometimes they can't just because there's not enough information, there is not enough
And also,
contrast in
there's
that.
so much, not just in hospital and the
Mm-hmm.
experience, because we do hospital and we do a lot of small practices. So one thing that we found in common, regardless of the size of the place, when you are in such a state of pain, and also like it's just you're receiving so much new data as a
Mm-hmm.
patient. I'm just looking at myself and I'm putting myself in our clients' patient shoes. Like
Yeah.
if I'm like, one of the things that right now one of our clients is a GI doctor, gastrologist, meaning the stomach and like all the pain that it goes through. They do procedure in this space. So when the patient, if I put myself and or my design team, we do that practice that like we put ourselves in the patient's shoes, right?
Mm-hmm.
You walk in, there's uncertainty. You don't know, like you're going to receive so much information. The last thing you want to think about, where do I go and how do I go? So a lot of the practices, they have a really good internal system with their staff, but the way we always design, we use signage and lighting and color as something that we guide the patients through
Right.
subconsciously. So what that means, a lot of times with dental offices like room 1, 2, or operatory 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, instead of using a lot of artwork in the hallway, we use the signage and we reverse it and we make it simple and beautiful that can be part of the artwork, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like think like how would I feel when I'm in this space, and then what would simplify it. And the other part into it is lighting, right? How you
Sure.
can illuminate the signage that it even like grab our attention without being too powerful, right? Again, back to like less is more, I believe, in the design, because it gives us the allowance to feel, to walk through the space with much more flow. So I think this is what we usually do, and it's been working, and it's very powerful. And so, like, I've been seeing it like over and
Mm-hmm.
over again, and we go back to the practices that we've done. We ask our clients, like, what are the feedbacks? What are you thinking, and what have you experienced with your patient? The smaller one, usually, like, they get like much more one-on-one feedback from the
Mm-hmm.
patient. The larger spaces, they usually talk to their staff, or they give them like, or on their Yelp reviews. Like it's so amazing. Like they talk about the doctor, great doctor, but then they go like, oh, we love the color of their like waiting rooms. And so
Sure.
it's so amazing. Like we know it or we don't know it, as a human being, we're super clever being. Like subconsciously we pick up on all the colors, on the lighting, on the signage, and the better, the not even better, just being more thoughtful and mindful of how to design that, the environment, it becomes more awesome, more healing, and it gives a better experience to the doctors, to the hospital, to the patients, because I believe that regardless of the specialty or the even the what kind of environment beside the medical, any kind of environment, the main point in what kind of experience we're experiencing inside that environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Definitely.
that back to all of your research. The wayfinding, back to the wayfinding, because I know you and we talked about that a lot.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that's something is very powerful. And if we can start giving some tips, and then if anyone has any question, they can like, put their question. I'm looking at the screen so I can raise it. But a little bit talk about wayfinding, and then I want to end our talk about like what are the very simplest tools that anyone from
Mm-hmm.
medical to their home office to their home, they can use to even like making a more intentional and elevated space.
Absolutely. So I think wayfinding is a very hot topic these days in healthcare design, and it has been around. It started a few decades ago by Kevin Lynch, that he just like looked at the image of the city and how we walk through the city and how can we find our way. And it's part of our cognition. So our cognitive processes help us to find our destinations. And we all the time we seek information from different environmental factors, even without knowing that. Like we have subconsciously we are seeking information, and that happens all the time, right? So that makes the topic very more interesting when we know that we are talking about subconscious. And you mentioned some interesting points here, like, subconsciously impacting the way that people perceive the environment, right?
Yeah.
So one way to do that is playing with, or just like doing the design intervention in a way that even the participants or the patients, they don't realize it. One example can be illuminating, like we're talking about lighting. People tend to avoid spaces that they are dark or dim, right? So if you go to a hospital, if you see there's a hallway that's not illuminated well, I mean, it's likely that you don't go there. And that's one way that people can just play with different environmental factors to guide people, this is the right place to go or not. And color is a big deal. We talked about it, and signage. But one other aspects that I think we didn't mention, that when it comes to wayfinding, is the spatial organization or a spatial layout of the hospitals. And that's kind of in the planning phase. When you plan in terms of space planning of the hospitals, it's important to think about wayfinding, because that's something that you don't see. So signage, lighting, color, views to outside, directories. So those are all visual environmental attributes that we can see and we can seek information. But there are some other aspects of the environment that we don't see them, like a spatial layout of the space. And that's in the planning phase. And there are different ways that researchers have been focused on to investigate how we can design a spatial layout. And one way to do that is a space syntax. And a space syntax is a theory and a method that you can investigate how the hallways or how the different areas of hospitals are connected to each other. So it's kind of like a hard science, major that you can just focus and do some. It's kind of quantitative way to investigate how different corridors or intersections between the corridors are related to each other, and that helps planners and designers to come up with better solutions. Or even it's important even when hospitals undergo development or they want to have some renovations. So sometimes they want to change the spatial layout, and a space syntax can help with it. So to sum up, I think thinking about two aspects, the spatial layout of the space and focusing on the second one, which is the visual environmental factors, color, lighting, maps, directories, and when it comes to signage, we are talking about different types of signage. Some of the signage, they direct you to a place. Some signage that they just give you information. So there are different signage that it's becoming a knowledge by itself. So just like signage design is very complicated. So I think
For me,
yeah.
I love what you said. One of the biggest thing that I would like to anyone that is listening is lighting. Um, Besides, in a medical environment, just finding your way, creating the space finding that has a really tremendous amount of flow, and it put us at ease mentally and physically, and like make everything so much more comfortable. One of the biggest element is lighting, that I know, like we talked about that before, that human behavior is controlled by lighting. You know how there's a plant, if you put the plant next to the window, it's going to keep like diversifying and going towards the direction of light, right? So one of the things that we always do, and for all of our listeners, that they can do at home, is checking your light bulbs literally in your environments. Making sure, first of all of your lights, and this is one of my things, like when we passing by buildings, I usually, like, I'm not driving, like my husband driving, like I'm looking, I'm like, oh my God, this house, like each room has a different light temperature.
Right.
Because the best type of lighting is the natural light temperature. right? And
Mm-hmm.
natural light has a spectrum, if it's in the morning or if it's at noon or it's in the afternoon. But we usually like recommend to our client 3500 Kelvin is the best. It's kind of bright. It still has a touch of yellow, but it makes you feel awesome when you're in the space. So it's part of the interior design, and just a human behavior is really controls by lighting. So that's something that I know you and I talked about it, and you've done some research about it, and so I just wanted to bring it up.
Absolutely. And just like to add to your point, talking about lighting, I mean, it never ends, but just, you know, artificial lighting, like complementing with natural light, that's absolutely important in healthcare. Like we all know about the circadian rhythm and how the lighting can impact our body clock or like circadian rhythm
Yeah,
to
like jet lag. When you're getting
exactly.
jet lag and traveling, it affects us the same way, like in the environment, like medical, that doctors and their staff working all day. Yeah.
Yeah, and that just adjusting the circadian rhythm in our body, that's huge because that helps. You know, when it comes to hospitals, nurses, caregivers, they want to have that because they want to have enough sleep and having a sleep quality. That's important. And patients, the same thing. They want to have that circadian rhythm adjusted, and daylighting can do that for us. And that results in having a better sleep quality, which research shows that means healing faster.
And also, what's really important right now is with this COVID-19 and the situation, that what some of the design that we're doing right now, we're actually building in UV lighting.
Mm-hmm.
How we can use the different elements to that's what a part of our design to elevate your space. Elevating right now, it's meaning to keep your space safe. Okay. So
Definitely.
in our design, like something that is like any of the doctors that they can do, use UV lighting, because that is quick, that it can like really cleanse and like antivirus, antibacterial, and just like clean the area. So some, like we're getting like some interest from like different clients that they want to do, just go like a little bit far away to do a built-in their ceiling, but as simple as even they can do a portable one.
Mm-hmm.
There's some portable UV lighting that it can really make your space safe. And also we tell our clients, then tell your patients that this is the method that you're using to keep your environment very clean, very safe for them, because right now, and I believe like for the rest of the year, a lot of fear still is like will be around, like what is it like when I want to go like have an emergency, let's say tooth pain, like, or I have to do some sort of emergency procedure for like whatever that is to my doctor, like how the environment is so elevated and safe to basically to give me as a patient more peace of mind, that I don't hesitate. So part of I believe part of the being in creating an intentional interior design environment is about thinking ahead of the game, thinking what keeps your patients up at night, what makes them feel more comfortable. And if I can give couple tips right now, is that UV lighting,
Mm-hmm.
like like, and literally asking, like I do ask if I have to go to my doctor, I'm like, what are you doing to keep your space safe, right? That's a
Right.
simple thing that it can be done, and it's quite inexpensive and also brings so much peace of mind to everyone.
Absolutely. And just like as final thoughts, you know, when we talk about design and research, sometimes, I mean, you know better than me, you have had many years of experience in practice working with different types of clients. And I think it's a challenge for us as designers sometimes to convince the clients that this is good for you, this is good for the health outcome. And sometimes the clients are reluctant to do it because they are afraid of the initial cost of spending on design and research. But when we look at the data, what we see is very interesting because the design part is like 1% of the total cost of the health, and the research part is 0.1% of it. So it's just like a very small portion of it, which can bring return on investment, and pays back over time. And that, as you
It's such a
said,
high ROI. I've seen this over and over. Any of our clients that they invested into, not just us, meaning like hiring us, but because we had like really close relationship, their business transformed literally because they put that intention, they put the right team, they looked at all of their financial perspective of it, and then like, how can we bring this together to create something that is very quality for the long term, right? So and I love that you mentioned that. Go ahead.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just like I think that's kind of our challenge, but at the same time, it can be our opportunity to bring this conversation to clients, particularly talking about medical doctors and physicians. And I think we are in a much better position now compared to a few years ago. Just evidence-based healthcare design has been introduced. It has been educated by different people, and people are realizing that what we do as healthcare designer, that means something, and that can contribute to health and well-being of people.
Absolutely. There's some questions that I'm gonna propose it, and then you can tell everyone where
Sure.
they can find you. Like they want to know more about wayfinding. Maybe you have an article that you can let them know they can read it. Is there more information about you that they can find more information about wayfinding and also about you?
Yeah, I mean, I can provide those information, just maybe posting it on my Instagram page, or like sharing my contact information. I would love to share those research.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Have a fantastic Friday and the weekend, and what a better, like, amazing way to start May with this
Absolutely.
season of life. I'm looking forward to May because April was like intense,
Right.
and but it's all good. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Thanks for all what you do and the contribution that you have for healthcare design. It's much appreciated.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hessam. You're
All right.
awesome.